thrifting ain't easy, unless you're watching me. Welcome back. You're watching the Thrift Store Rundown, bringing Hollywood home on a budget, and throughout this week, we're participating in the Q&A review, asking questions to keep our curiosity about the world alive. And few experts on curiosity are as seasoned, well-traveled, and even battered and bruised in some places as journalists. You know, reporters in print, TV, and radio, and anchors who've dedicated their lives to asking tough questions and getting straight answers, all in the search for the truth. Most of them Crusaders, some of them Scoundrels, almost all of them journalists. And this mammoth tomb of wolf reporting honors them all, from the 1690s to the 1990s, the Newseum's most intriguing news people. And what's the Newseum? Well, it was, at the time, the first and only museum in the United States, based in our nation's capital, Washington, whose sole purpose was to preserve the history and art of journalism. This book was edited by Eric Newton, the managing editor of the Newseum, with a foreword by Tim Wessett, then moderator of NBC News' Meet the Press. It was published and edited by Times Books, and picked up for $4.99 from Weatherby Blue Thrift Store in Patterson, with hundreds and hundreds of journalists divided into 16 chapters. And those chapters are newsmongers, crusaders, political animals, humorists, war reporters, media moguls, sleuths, barrier breakers, photographers, literary journalists. Barrier breakers here salutes the people of color and women in the field. Radio people, TV people, martyrs, society's critics, sports people, and global villagers. Each chapter beginning with a summary that explains the trials and tribulations of all of these fields of journalism. Part of me so desperately wants to narrow this down to the TV people section, but we're going to cast as diverse and wide of a net as possible throughout this entire book, with not a moment to waste. After all, the story waits for no one. Let's begin with Marcus Garvey, the Black Moses. He was the editor and writer of his very own Negro's World, saying, "Hitch your hopes to the stars. Revered, reviled, remembered. Look for him in the whirlwind." Next, Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She was a writer at an early publication called The Lily, and later became editor of The Revolution. She was one of the pioneers of the women's suffrage movement, aka OG Female Empowerment. Next up, political animals. Well, they don't get more Texas-sized than Dan Rather. Texas-sized in one's brain and attitude, I should say. Yep, he was the pride of CBS News, the longest-serving anchor of its flagship evening news for nearly 25 years. And he always ran scared, never overconfident. Kind of odd considering that he was, and remains, even in his early 90s, rather outspoken. Which, by the way, is a book you can find on our channel. And audiobook, too. Here we have a fellow 60 Minutes comrade, the late Andy Rooney. He was a former war reporter for the Stars and Stripes newspaper, yet made his living as a pseudo-celebrity, even though he hated that phase and term, commentating on the everyday foibles and troubles of life. He won a few Emmys for doing so, and even was suspended for doing so a little too intensely by CBS management. Then 60 Minutes ratings flunked, and they reversed their suspension. Andy Rooney's no stranger to TSR. In fact, we've done a few of his essay compilation books. In fact, we did so a couple of weeks ago. Next, Morley Safer, another 60 Minutes veteran, probably the most folksy and artsy of all the 60 Minutes OG correspondents next to Bob Simon. He was a war reporter before joining 60 Minutes. Next up in the media moguls we have here, Oprah Winfrey. Really, not much needs to be said about Oprah, like O-R-P-A-H, which was her birth name. Then many people mispronounced it as Oprah, and the rest is history. History which first started for her in Baltimore and Nashville as a reporter and anchor before she landed in Chicago to do the AM Chicago talk show and save it from cancellation. The rest, again, is history. Well-documented history on this channel. We've done a few Oprah videos. And you still won't catch me dead screaming to Kingdom Come if I was a member of our audience getting one of our favorite things. Continuing with the 60 Minutes line, because Oprah was a special correspondent for a few years, we have a tie between Mike Wallace and Ed Bradley. One was feared more than the other, as you can tell through the many people who crossed his line of fire. A transcript of one of his interviews can be found here, portions of it, under I Heard You Right Here. Getting them right where he wants them. In fact, a beer company, Coors Light, even took out a full-page ad in the newspaper saying the most 4 dreaded words in the English language. Mike Wallace is here. Ed Bradley was no Mike Wallace, but then he didn't need to be. He was just Ed Bradley, intrepid in his own right, getting to the heart of the story and figuring out why it matters. In the Barrier Breaker section, Barbara Walters, the pride of ABC News. Don't get me started on the reports she did, and the stories she covered, and the people she interviewed throughout her time, starting with NBC News and then working her way up to pretty much own ABC News on air, alongside Peter Jennings, who's also featured in here, unsurprisingly. We have here the first ever full-time photographer for the Los Angeles Times, George Watson. You know, our primary mission is to bring Hollywood home on a budget. It wouldn't be right not to give George Watson a shout-out. He photographed Hollywood in its heyday. Albert Einstein, Charlie Chaplin, even visiting the King of Belgium. He has quite a Hollywood story to tell. Up next, a tribute between both E.B. White and Truman Capote. One was a successful children's literary author, solid swear anyone. The other, blacklisted for his more intense writings. Take your pick. Whose legacy do you admire the most? For radio people, it's gotta be Charles Osgood. Formerly of the Osgood File, his lyrical prose and straightforward wit made him an ideal successor for the late Charles Kuralt as host of CBS Sunday Morning. He and Kuralt have since passed on, but Jane Pauley's doing quite an admirable job. For TV people, yet again, a toss-up. Robert McNeil and Jim Lehrer on the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour. My boys. Simple, straightforward, to the point, no muss and no fuss. These two did it their way on PBS, covering the Watergate hearings, which won them an Emmy, beginning their own series, which was then titled The Robin McNeil Report in 1975, and then later transformed into The McNeil-Lehrer Report, expanding from a half hour to a full hour, becoming the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour, and today, with both of them having passed on, but their journalistic values remaining intact, and the order of the day for everyone at the PBS News Hour, today the PBS News Hour remains strong, in the face of trials and tribulations that the entire PBS system will be overcoming. Thanks a lot, again, President Trump. By the way, the current co-anchors, Jeff Bennett and Amna Nawaz, stay the course, you two. Stay the course. By the way, their successors, Glenn Eiffel and Judy Woodruff. Two of a kind. Diggy Chappelle was a freelance writer-photographer who mostly covered wars. She was one of the few women in the field to do so. So she definitely gets a shout-out. War is by far the most hellish story to cover. For Society's critics, other than Andy Rooney, the team of Ebert and Siskel, or should it be Siskel and Ebert, definitely get a thumbs up from me. 2 thumbs up if I could put this book down. Yep. Because they pretty much made thumbs up, thumbs down the defining factor for any movie's success at the box office on other newspapers and TV movie review shows on their show, Siskel and Ebert. I grew up in the Ebert and Roper era, Richard Roper. Both of them are now reviewing the type of movies they want to watch in the great big theater in the sky. For sports, we got Bob Costas. Not a lot I can say about Bob Costas, except he's definitely the pro at sports reporting. The Emmy proves it, the acclaim proves it, but mostly, it's just a lot of fun to listen to and try to imitate. Although, there really are no professional Bob Costas imitators out there. There can't be. There's only one. Finally, in the Global Villager section, we gotta highlight Ted Turner. He wasn't really a journalist by trade, but did invent the standard for cable journalism, which really isn't the standard anymore. CNN, Cable News Network. Really, his credo is to act. And no, he's not an actor, but it's to act upon the courage of one's convictions and the courage of one's steps, as another reporter, Eric Severide, would say. No need for a picture walk. All pictures are in black and white, all detailing in brief the careers of all these Crusaders, Scoundrels, and journalists, along with transcripts from some interviews they've done on the corresponding, receiving, questioning side, and a lot more. Because all the photos are in black and white, I'm inclined to give it 4.5 out of 5 claps, because many journalists don't see the world as black and white anymore, especially in the era of social media, news blogs, and of course, The Daily Show. Crusaders, Scoundrels, journalists. If you ever met any of them in your lifetime, and your only response to any of their questions was, "What's it to ya?" Keep in mind, you're keeping the legacy of journalism alive through your response. Responses are everything, equal to questions that really reveal one's true character. And what's it to you is kind of shady, but then again, who are we to judge unless you actually land up in a newspaper, or on TV, or subject to Daily Show fodder. And what's this to me? Unquestionably ace. And any future ace reporter should be asking about this. Any questions? If not, here's what's on deck for Thursday. In fact, at the end of the very first episode, one commented in the next episode that they were gonna save a marriage by answering a viewer dilemma. Thanks for tuning in. Just so you know, there's no limit to bringing Hollywood home on a budget. Please go ahead and check out another awesome review like this one by clicking here, and make sure you subscribe by clicking here. Until next time, I'll catch you, as I always do, on the Thrift side.